Hello, welcome to everyone joining us. My name is Kayla LaRiviere, and I'm the Indigenous intern this summer at the Center for Human Rights Research. As you may know, June is celebrated as Pride Month, and today I will be chatting with CHRR research affiliate, Dr. Jocelyn Thorpe, to talk about it. Dr. Thorpe is an associate professor of gender studies and history at the University of Manitoba. She is also the incoming director at the Center of Creative Writing and Oral Culture. Her research focuses on the histories and legacies of colonialism in the Canadian context. She is also 1/7 of the Queer Brady Bunch, which includes 2 adults, 4 children, and 1 puppy. Good afternoon, Dr. Thorpe. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you, Kayla. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I'm so glad you can join us. I'll be asking you a few questions today, and I hope you can start with explaining what Pride is.
Sure. I think of Pride, I guess, in 2 ways. One is a celebration of what we might call queer life outside the heterosexual status quo. And the other part of that and the origin of Pride is that it's really a form of resistance to a status quo that dictated that there were correct and incorrect ways of what Judith Butler calls doing gender. So that if you were biologically male, you needed to dress in a particular way and perform a certain, form of masculinity to be a man. And part of being a man meant then being in a monogamous heterosexual relationship, preferably that involved a biological female who identified as a woman who then wanted to, or was willing to cook, clean, raise the children, etc. So the gendered status quo is very much associated with or connected with heterosexuality. And so people who lived outside of that status quo, whether in terms of their ways of performing gender or in terms of their desire for a person or people of the same sex or sort of across those gender lines, then found themselves not only not normal, but in some cases outside of the law as well. So the most kind of famous example of fighting against this gendered status quo was at Stonewall in June, not coincidentally, of 1969, which was the year that my partner was born, where a gay bar was raided or a queer bar was raided. And instead of, quickly trying to escape or whatever, people fought back in what's been called then the Stonewall riots. And the Stonewall riots were followed by protests across the United States and other places in the world as well, where people basically said, enough is enough. We're not doing anything criminal, and so we shouldn't be made criminal by dressing a certain way or loving a certain person.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm wondering, why is it important to have a month dedicated to Pride, along with recognizing specific days such as International Women's Day?
That's a really good question, and I have kind of a complicated answer because I'm in two minds about the whole thing. Is on the one hand, I wish that it weren't necessary. I think that if we lived in a world where you love who you love, it's no big deal, then we don't need to have a month dedicated to Pride. We don't need to have any days dedicated to Pride. And similarly, we wouldn't need to have an International Women's Day or an International Indigenous Peoples Day or a Black History Month if it were that the status quo included equally everyone as a subject who has history, as a subject whose life and love and freedom is important. And so on the one hand, I think, it would be nice to have these things not be necessary. But on the other hand, I think that we're not there yet. And in our not being there, then Pride is a way of celebrating love that isn't always celebrated. So I think about the NFL football player who came out yesterday and he said on Instagram, I'm gay and I've been meaning to say this for a while, and I kind of hope that there's a day that this isn't really necessary, this kind of coming out video, or having it be, that people are able to express their support or their lack of support for him. And I see where he's coming from, because I kind of think, well, yeah, you want it to have it be that you announce that you have fallen in love with somebody, and no matter who it is, if they're a kind person and a loving person and somebody you love, then you hope that your family and your community will say, oh, that's so wonderful, that's such great news. But the fact that he's the first currently playing out NFL player shows that this isn't the world that we live in necessarily at the moment. So that's kind of the why I think it would be great to work ourselves out of Pride Month. But on the other hand, I see so much beauty in it too. And I think about National Indigenous Peoples Day or Indigenous Peoples Day yesterday, and just we really had the opportunity to see all the amazing things that Indigenous people are doing, and to celebrate that. And so then, then I think, well, we hope that that wouldn't just be on one day, right? That 364 other days there are to celebrate Indigenous peoples and to talk about how important it is and to move against colonial institutions that continue to influence the present. We can do that all year. But that these moments give us the opportunity then to be paying attention to things that we should be paying attention to all the time.
Thank you for that. I totally agree with you on, celebrating these days and these months. And I also heard about the NFL player just on TV today. So I'm glad you touched on that. I am wondering, and I'm curious, how has the meaning behind Pride changed over the years?
I'd say that it is less of a protest these days and more of a party. But I do think that those two things are related, right? Because the right to love who you love or perform gender how you want to perform gender is something that's not always considered to be okay, right? And so in celebrating that, it is also a way of protesting against a status quo that makes possible violence against queer people. And so yeah, I think about what the goal is, and I think, well, to me, the goal is to have a world where people are safe, right? Whether they're Indigenous women, whether they're trans women, whether they're, queer identified people, that people should be able to walk home safely, that people shouldn't have to fear violence because of how it is that they walk in the world. And so overall, I'd say that there's a shift toward that, toward a celebration where everybody can come and everybody's welcome and that it's fun, but not forgotten, or not to be forgotten, I think, is that the broader purpose is to say that love is love. There are different ways of doing gender, and that all of those ways should be fine. And that, yeah, that we need to create that every day, not just in June.
Thank you. And while we're on this topic, I'm wondering if you have any Pride stories that you can share with us.
Sure. I think probably everybody remembers their first Pride. And for me, my first Pride was in Toronto when I was 19, I guess. I had just started dating a boyish girl trumpet player who, I don't know, captured my heart. And I think I had no idea what it all meant. And, but I knew that it was important. And I guess, yeah, so she said, we should go to Pride. And I was like, what's Pride? So we went to this enormous celebration in downtown Toronto, and it just was completely overwhelming. Not only because of all the different ways of being a human that were visible there, but also just because of the sheer numbers of people. And so it sort of helped me to think about, the relationship between my very small story and life of sort of going about my life and then falling in love with this person, where my relationship with her made everyone think about me differently. But I didn't really think about myself differently at all, because I was just like, oh, I'm just the same me. I've just fallen in love with this person who's changed my life. And so it's sort of a way of grappling with that, the strangeness of that, of just kind of being me, but then suddenly being part of this bigger story, this bigger history. And so that I'll always remember. We got to climb behind, there was a ladder up for some reason, so we got to climb on top of these buildings and then watch from above the Pride Parade, and it was just cool and fun. And yeah, and then what I remember more recently is going with the kids to Pride and having family Pride be something that was kind of neat too, because I think when I knew that I wanted to have kids, I also kind of felt like, oh, is it okay to, bring kids into the world who have two moms, and are we asking for trouble here? And the kids didn't ask for this. And then to be able to see such different ways of being a family, and also such powerful ways of being a family or being families. I always will remember that, both in Toronto and in Winnipeg. And I think now my kids think of Pride as like a fun thing that they get to do, representing the University of Manitoba while dressing awesomely, fabulously even. And my daughter, when she was little, she would decorate her bike, and then she would wear all the hats that she had. So that's her Willa at Pride, wearing every single hat that she owned.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that and for taking the time to share your knowledge and your own personal experiences with us today on this very important topic. I hope those watching have learned something new. I know I definitely have. And I'm wondering if you just have any last words to say.
Well, happy Pride, everybody. And I look forward to a time where we can all celebrate in person.
Thank you. I hope you have a great day. And all those who are watching, thank you so much.
Thank you.